senior officials of the Departments of Education, chairpersons and chief executive officers of Umalusi, the South African Qualifications Authority, University of South Africa, members of teacher unions that are present, and other social partners, parents, and representatives of the various media houses that are present, and learners that may be in our midst already. Now, my task is a simple one, and I am expected to set the stage. And in trying to understand what we are here about to do, having grown up in South Africa and having been a learner at school, a teacher at school, and subsequently a manager in education, one thing is for certain: come the beginning of January or the end of December, it would appear as if the entire nation goes into a tailspin or is launched into a sense of frenzy. And if one were to investigate further and understand what is it that's about to happen, it's all about the Matric examination. We as a country are intensely concerned and supportive of education of our learners. And what I've come to realize is that when a learner writes the Matric examination, it's not just the learner himself or herself, but it's an entire household. And given the focus and the attention that we place on education in this country, we all wait with bated breath to get a sense of how the 800,000 learners that have written the 2015 National Senior Certificate Examination have performed. Now, the anxiety and the tension of the 800,000 learners will end at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. But the Matric examination is not just about learners writing this examination, which is their passport to adult life, to university, and to the world of work. But the Matric examination is also a lens through which we are able to understand the performance of the education system. And this afternoon, our Minister of Education, the Honorable Mrs. Angie Motshekga, will provide us her report on how the class of 2015 has performed, and as a consequence, how are we doing as a nation in terms of reaching our goals and our targets with regard to education. But prior to this important ministerial announcement, this technical briefing will allow you an opportunity to have deeper insights into the Matric results and what they mean at the provincial, district, and school level. And there's nobody more suitably qualified than our recently appointed Director General, who in a sense presides over the administrative affairs of the department. And ladies and gentlemen, let me on behalf of this gathering congratulate Mr. Mweli on his appointment as the Director General. He needs no special introduction. He's been in the education fraternity for a number of years, and I think he is possibly one of the most suitable candidates to manage and lead us in terms of education. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my proud privilege to now present to you and to welcome to the podium Mr. Herbert Matanzima Mweli, the Director General of the Department of Basic Education. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Mweli.
Good afternoon, Program Director, MECs that are present here, members of oversight structures of Parliament, national and provincial. I've seen the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee for Basic Education. I also want to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues, DGs who might be here, provincial heads of departments, colleagues from the Department of Basic Education, all officials present, the labor, which is here, teacher unions and all unions that are here. I also want to acknowledge and appreciate the presence of important entities represented here, such as Umalusi. I've seen some of the colleagues here. I must also appreciate the presence of the CEO of SAQA that I've seen a while ago, and all honored guests. I can see that I cannot run through the entire list. Members of the media who play a very important role in informing the nation, as well as experts of the education field. I've seen Professor Mary McCarth. I've been following what experts have been saying in anticipation of today's developments, and it's quite interesting. And I think it is then appropriate for me to say, I can assure you that this evening, when the minister announces the results to the nation, you will definitely enjoy it. And in essence, you are in for an excellent treat. If you had doubts about being here this evening, let me assure you the Deputy Minister and the Minister will ensure that you don't regret. I am going to present the technical report. This is not a special waiting room until the Minister comes and announces the results. It is an important ritual for us in basic education, not only in the Department of Basic Education, but in the basic education sector, that we go through this exercise so that we give content to what the Minister is going to speak about. The Minister will not have time to get into some of the detail that we are going to share with you. In following the analysis and the discussions in the public and from very important people, including Umalusi and other experts, it is very clear in my mind that the National Senior Certificate is just but one indicator, I want to emphasize, just but one indicator of performance in the system. There are a number of indicators of performance in the system, and I will try to go through some of them, but I won't be able to cover all of them today. Let me then get into the presentation, because examinations comes right at the tail end. Dr. Polia likes saying it is a mirror of what we've been going through. When we see spots in the mirror from our faces, we don't destroy the mirror. We simply go back and address the spots that might be on our faces. That's how important exams or examinations are to the system. Now, this is how the presentation is organized. It's got an introduction. It will cover principles used to measure performance. I'll share some information on the size of the sector, because that's very important. When we compare, we make sure that we compare the right variables. In other words, we compare apples with apples. And what was interesting, Program Director, is that a few days ago, after the IEB results were released, and I listened to the interview which was done by the CEO of the IEB, Anne Obelholzer. And when Anne was asked as to what is it that the public sector can learn from education, in fact from IEB, Anne responded by saying, it is not a useful comparison because the IEB, it's a very small component if you compare to the size of the public schooling sector. And I thought it might be useful to share some information on what the sector involves. What do we mean when we talk about the basic education sector and not the Department of Basic Education? Right? A useful point of departure is that members of UNESCO, South Africa being one, are expected to implement the new Sustainable Development Goals, which replaced the Millennium Development Goals. There are 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and goal number 4 is the one relevant to education. And that goal says ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. That's a very important point of departure. For the first time in the history of the development of our country, that you have the Sustainable Development Goal, you can see it talks about education, education 2015, but essentially referring to Agenda 2030. You also have the National Development Plan, whose time frame is located around 2030. You have the Basic Education Sector Plan 2019 towards schooling 2030. There is such an inextricable alignment between very important tools that we use in our country to set our vision and to measure the progress that we are making, aligned to even the international community. And I think it's an immense opportunity that we have as the basic education sector to make sure that we don't miss this opportunity of making sure that we turn the basic education system around, because all instruments are now converging in one direction. What are the principles used to measure education? I am quite thrilled with the interest that South Africans have on education, because education is very close to their lives. Education is extremely important for every South African. But I think it's also important to know that how we measure education, both nationally and internationally, it must be useful to align what we do with what the rest of the world is doing. Reading the literature of UNESCO, as well as other important bodies, I have learned that there are 5 principles that are used to measure progress in education. Principle number 1 is about access, a very important principle. Access to education. And at all times, priority is given to placing access as principle number 1. Very important. The second one is about redress, the extent to which the system is able to address the imbalances of the past. And the third one is about equity. Equity in terms of gender, equity in terms of geography, equity in terms of the learning outcomes, whether you're talking quantity, quality, and so on. The next one is about efficiency in the system. how efficient are we as a system? That's very important in measuring our education system. And the last important one, which I'm going to leave really to be dealt with in the main, by the main event of today, but I'll try to, share some data on the first four, and then the last one, and I think the results of the National Senior Certificate will go a long way in addressing principle number 5. In terms of the size and shape of the sector, this is the basic education sector, because I said we are not talking about the Department of Basic Education. It's about 9 departments plus 1, which gives you 10. You can see that you've got 9 provincial education departments plus the National Department of Education, carrying out their responsibilities within concurrent functions. I always try to explain this, but I know that I don't always succeed. The relationship between provinces and the National Department of Education is regulated, particularly in terms of Section 100 of the Constitution. It is a concurrent function. And I'm sure we all know that the Constitution is very clear. No sphere of government is subordinate to one another. The Constitution actually says spheres of government are interdependent. And that's very crucial. It's very, very important. When we see it in meetings at national level, we carry out our responsibilities in terms of Section 100 of the Constitution, but also in terms of the National Education Policy Act, which enables us to carry out that responsibility, whether it's the Council of Education Ministers or whether it's the Committee of Heads of Departments. It's essentially a meeting of equals. I'm saying it's essentially a meeting of equals. And I'm sure we'll expand on that point later on, if not in future. Again, in this sector, you've got 12,655,436 learners. That's the number of learners that you have in the sector. In terms of the number of educators, you've got 425,090. In terms of the number of schools, you've got 25,741. And you can see that if you compare the public and the independent school system, number of learners is 12,117,015. If you compare the number of learners with learners in the independent school sector, you've got 538,421. The same goes for educators. The number of educators is 390,608 for public schools. And then in terms of the independent school sector, you've got 34,482. Number of schools, public schooling sector, you've got 24,060. Independent schools, you've got 1,681. So it's a huge sector. And the languages that are used there are indicated, and those are the totals. This is the delineation of the figures. If you break it down per province, in terms of public versus independent, and if you combine both, you'll see that KZN commands the largest number in terms of learners and educators. It's got close to 25% of the total number of learners in the system. The minister likes saying KZN determines the tempo of the national system. Whether we go up or down, KZN has got a major influence given the learner numbers. Now, in terms of access, this is very important. Learners who are 5-year-old attending education institutions, you'll see that those provinces that are shaded are those that experienced regression. In other words, they either went down or either they increased in terms of the issue that we are looking at. We improved from 85.3 to 87.2 in the sector. And if we proceed, the intake of grade 1 learners, you'll observe that we've got 101.4%. There are many underage learners there, especially in the rural areas where you find that parents are working, there's no one to look after the youngest who's not ready for schooling. And then what happens is that the youngest will join the rest and form part of the classroom, and that inflates the learner numbers. And that's the problem that you'd experience. That's why we always caution that it's not always useful to use the grade 1 learners as a projection and then move over to say learners who started grade 1, because some of those learners might spend more than 1 year in grade 1 because they are not age appropriate. They might repeat once, twice or so until they are school ready. Seven to 13-year-olds attending education institutions, we remained at the same percentage of 99.3%. Which is close to universal coverage. And I'm sure we'll appreciate that whether you're talking Africa or you're talking the entire world, there are very few countries that really hit the mark of close to universal coverage. And then 7 to 15-year-olds, well, the pattern goes on, close to universal coverage, and of course, the information broken down per province there, we are close to almost 100%. And I should have indicated that this data is the latest. The household data of Stats SA is just a year behind, and that's why it stretches up to 2014. But this is incredible. Useful data that determines the progress that we are making in the sector. 14 to 18-year-olds, again, a slight improvement of from 90.3% to 90.7%. This is secondary schooling. Learners with special education needs, because in terms of inclusivity, it's very, very important that learners with special education needs also attend our education institutions. A slight drop, as you can see, a slight drop from 85.2% to 83.9%. And then 7 to 15-year-olds, still learners with special education needs, a slight improvement of 92.5% to 93.4%. 16 to 18-year-olds, a major drop, as you can see, from 70.3% to 54.1%. This is the cohort of learners that gets lost in the system into what we call need. Those that are not employed or not in education and training. Every year, we observe an increase of about 500,000 of such learners. And what we have decided to do, which the Minister will also announce this evening, is to come up with a third stream in the sector, the third pathway. Currently, you've got the academic pathway, you've got the technical vocational pathway, and our system is a bit lopsided because the majority of our learners offer the academic pathway. Close to 70 to 80% of our learners offer academic pathway. That's why universities get flooded, and you find that learners in TVET colleges are not as many as it would be expected. So what we are going to be doing starting from this year we have strengthened the technical vocational pathway. We have increased the number of subjects from 4 to 12. And the 12 subjects include technical mathematics and technical science. We're starting to implement in grade 10. We've already started to see some very good signs in the system of the participation rate in the technical vocational stream increasing. Our intention is that we need to turn the system around. OECD indicates that if we are to move towards a healthy direction, we need to have about 40% of our learners offering the academic pathway and 60% split between technical vocational and technical occupational stream. And that's what we are starting to do this year. In grade 10, the grade 10 learners of this year will be introduced to what we call CAPS for technical high schools that offers 12 instead of 4 subjects. And we believe that this will go a long way in addressing the lopsidedness of the system of offering mainly learners in the academic stream to the detriment of the technical, vocational, and technical occupational stream. In addition to that, in 2017, to address the very problem that I've alluded to, we've developed 26 subjects which are going to be introduced in grade 4 for schools of skill. If you go to countries like Finland and Germany, they run with education systems that have a 3-stream model. Is the academic pathway, which would have your least number of learners, followed by technical vocational, which will have the most number of learners, and your technical occupational, which will be second to your technical vocational. And that's the direction that we are going. We have been meeting with the higher education and training, and we've had very exciting discussions, and which will help even to strengthen our post-schooling system going forward. Percentage of learners who fell pregnant, unfortunately, we went down. You can see that we've dropped. In fact, we increased from 2.5% to 2.7%. And the explanation that the minister usually gives is that schools are a microcosm of civil society. What happens at school would have manifested in communities. It is simply reflected in schools. Percentage of grade 1 to 9 learners who have access to language and mathematics workbooks, the percentage is 96.3, and if you look at the figures of 2015, the percentage is almost 100% there. Access to textbooks, grade 10 to grade 12, 77.6%, 0.7%, and I can assure this audience that when it comes to grade 11 and 12, it's definitely universal coverage. We still have gaps in grade 10 and the lower grades. I'll move over this one because it's essentially covered in the next slide. Well, just to indicate the progress that we have made in reducing the phenomenon of learners who don't have textbooks, you can see that it has drastically reduced. I think the patterns are indicating there for each of the provinces. Percentage of learners who are absent from school, unfortunately, a slight increase there from 6.6 to 7.2. Percentage of 5 to 6 year old who are working for more than 30 minutes. There's a slight improvement in terms of the reduction from 10% to 8.1. Well, age 15 to age 17, there's a slight improvement there from 13.5% to 12%. Thank you, Dr. Polly. (16 to 18-year-olds), a slight improvement of 21% to 19.1%. Corporal punishment, a matter that has become topical in the public space. Again, I'm sure we can also indicate that the difficulty around this one is that it's one of those factors that are a spillover into schools from a civil society. We come from a very violent past. We've not been able to turn that situation around. People still believe that the best way to resolve problems is through violence. Redress and equity. The number of schools benefiting from feeding scheme, a slight improvement, almost 80%, slightly below 80%, and I can indicate that almost 9.2 million out of 12 million learners benefit from feeding scheme. No-fee schools, 9.4 million learners who benefit from this, 78.6%, 20,000 schools that out of the 24,000 schools benefit from this. And then you have a total percentage of 87.14. And somebody was asking, are we likely to experience fees must fall in the schooling system? I don't want to say never, but it shows that at least we've gone a long way in addressing the issue. Efficiency, this is very important. One of the issues that dominated the release of the Matric results since 2014 is progressed learners. The basic education sector took a conscious decision to come up with a policy to intervene, to deal with blockages, particularly, I don't seem to be successful, around your grade 10 and 11 grades, or grade 10 and 11. You would appreciate that grade 10 takes the summit of the number of learners who are repeating in the system. And the point that I must try to make is that it is not entirely true that many learners drop out of the system. In fact, the major problem that we have in the basic education sector is the repetition rate, as you can see from the graphs there. Learners take more than 12 years to complete schooling. Some 15, some even more than 15, as you would have seen. Ever since we introduced the policy on progress learners in 2013, you can see particularly a drop from grade 10, from grade 11, from grade 12, an overall drop, as you would see, from 12.2% to 11.3%. That's very significant. Dropout rate, the actual dropout rate is between 15 and 20% in the sector. Not 50% as people would usually put it. The problem is that you don't account for learners who finish grade 9 and go to TVET colleges. They are not accounted for. That's point number one. Point number two, as explained in terms of the repetition rate, there's a correlation between the repetition rate and dropout rate. But I always say the two are not necessarily synonymous. But repetition influences dropout, because learners who repeat over a long time end up leaving the system and getting lost in the system. So our dropout rate, and of course I will accept that our data is a bit old, it's up to 2012. This data is done after 3 to even 5 years. So our dropout rate is actually between 15 and 20%. Now, as indicated earlier on, because I'm going to move faster now, quality will be reflected in terms of the progress that we have made in terms of the learning outcomes. And in this regard, as indicated, that the National Senior Certificate is just but one indicator of the progress that we are making. We'll focus on that. We've also been using the annual national assessments. We've been using international tests such as TIMSS and PILS. So I'll move over quickly to provide you with the technical report. Right. Well, somebody said, this is what I've been waiting for. There are a number of variables that are used really to determine the performance of the enterprise as big as basic education. And I'm sure the audience will appreciate the figures that we have already shared in terms of the size of the sector. The National Senior Certificate, it's a very important indicator of the health of the system, particularly in terms of those who are leaving the system, either going to further their education at universities, University of Technology, etc., and etc., and those who get into the world of work. And there has been this view by some that our National Senior Certificate don't seem to carry the currency that should be expected of it. I must maybe use this opportunity to say the University of Cape Town carried out a study in 2011 involving an international expert. The outcomes of that study proved otherwise. And they actually indicate that the National Senior Certificate has immense currency. There's a proportional relationship between the certificate and possibilities of getting employment or even moving in the upward ladder in the employment. And I think we have put that out in our website for those who are interested to see that study, just to indicate that it is not always true that the National Senior Certificate don't carry the currency that is expected of it. Exams it's about standard setting, but standard setting really begins with the curriculum. In 2008, we implemented the National Curriculum Statement, continuing the notion of high skills, high knowledge curriculum. It is viewed as a world-class curriculum by many experts in South Africa and outside, and we do benchmark our curriculum and even our examination papers with world-renowned bodies elsewhere in the world. And it's also important that quality is embedded in the quality of our question papers. And I'm sure we'll appreciate that the cognitive demand in the papers that were set from last year to this year increased. In fact, some people are arguing that in some subjects there have been a radical departure and reflecting what CAPS is actually dictating as to what should form the cognitive demand in our assessment items. Our law order questions are reducing. More and more questions will expect learners to demonstrate their analytical, their innovative abilities. They would also expect them to be au fait with contemporary information. Let me just give an example. In the history question paper, learners were expected, out of 30 marks, to discuss the reason why members of BRICS established the Development Bank in 2014. I wonder how many would be able to answer that question. In one life sciences question, which is a 2-mark question, a law order question for that matter, learners were expected to identify an example of external fertilization, and they had to use the seahorse. I wonder how many would be able to do that. That is the nature of the cognitive demand that is beginning to reflect in our question papers. We are preparing our learners for now, for future, and we are not only preparing the future citizenry of this country, we are preparing the future citizenry of the global village. Our children should be able to comfortably compete with the rest of the world. They must be able to emerge as stars. And we use question papers also to stretch the capacity of teaching, because the diagnostic reports that we produce will reflect the subject content knowledge gaps and pedagogy, as well as misconceptions that were identified in the analysis of the learner scripts. Quality is also embedded in the administration of a system as big as ours. I think we were worried when we had 2 papers that leaked for life sciences in Limpopo, and the team quickly worked with Umalusi, assisted by Sakwa and others, and managed that situation quite well. Marking is another area. We have a long way to go to improve our marking, but we've introduced things like the tolerance range, so the marking is becoming stringent so that learners who do not deserve certain marks should not get them. And those who deserve marks for the correct answers must be given the marks that they deserve. Of course, competency assessment is implemented not uniformly across the entire system. I may also just caution, competency assessment is not a panacea. We are thinking of a basket of interventions that can help to improve our marking, and competency assessment is one of them. The standardization of examination results, large-scale examination systems can only survive and only produce credible results if they go through standardization. And therefore, standardization is very important. I must commend Umalusi for the work that they do. And I think they keep the nation informed, although I feel that this time around they've become a bit more transparent than they should have been. It is just tongue-in-cheek. It means nothing. And we must appreciate that they actually do what quality assurance bodies do not do in other countries. I mean, results of standardization are not made as public as Umalusi does in our country, and we must commend them for that, for living up to the letter of our Constitution. Let me also just indicate that the class of 2015 is the 8th cohort of the group of learners who went through the National Senior Certificate, is the 2nd cohort that went through CAPS. It entered formal schooling in January 2004. It therefore had the benefits of the revised national curriculum statement. It also benefited from the maturity of the system as we're moving away from outcomes-based education to a more streamlined, content-focused, knowledge-based, as opposed to nomenclature and approach kind of curriculum. This class also benefited from having gone through ECD. Many of them went through grade R, and therefore they would have benefited a lot from the system. Now, the machinery that carried out the National Senior Certificate, total number of candidates, 799,306, full-time candidates, 667,925. Part-time candidates, much fewer numbers than last year, or 2014, 131,381. Number of question papers, 258. It means you appoint 258 panels of examiners of an average of about between 4 and 5 members, each paper having its own panel. Printed question papers, 7.8 million. Number of scripts, 10.5 million. We have to account for every script in the system. Every script represents a soul in the basic education sector. It is not just paper. It is a human being that we see behind the script. Invigilators, 65,000. Markers, men and women who toiled within a very confined period of 10 days to mark all of the scripts, 49,900. Marking centers, 121. Well, what we see before us is the number of candidates who wrote. We've had the highest number of candidates who wrote Matric exams in the history of education in South Africa. It's not a slip of the tongue. We've had the highest number of candidates who wrote Matric this year, and I'll give you the exact figures in a while. Candidates who wrote the 2015 NSC exam, 644,536. The figures are broken down this way. KZN, the highest, followed by Gauteng, and then followed by Limpopo. If you take KZN's numbers, combine them with Eastern Cape, combine them with Limpopo, it gives you 54%. So the three provinces can actually decide the direction that the qualification should take, whether we're going up or we're going down. Now, the longitudinal analysis of trends indicate that in 1970 you had 43,000 candidates who passed Matric. In 2014 you had 403,874. That's the journey that we have traveled. And I enjoined all of us to read the vision of the National Development Plan, which will remind us of the journey that we need to continue to sojourn. Well, as already indicated, 2015 remains the highest so far, highest number of learners, taking into account interventions of dealing with inefficiency, those learners who were culled and kept in grade 10 and grade 11 through the implementation of the policy on progressed learners. This is the cumulative effect of that. Percentage of endorsed or bachelors, 1994 to 2015, our highest point was in 2013, where we got 30.6%. The overall national results, let's see. I nearly slipped and pressed the wrong button. Well, our highest point was 78.2. We dropped last year. Anywhere in the world, when you introduce changes in your curriculum, is bound to cause a dip to the system. And let me indicate, it might take 3 to 5 years to stabilize and get the system taking an upward trend. If you happen to move upward, it might not be sustainable until you do it, you build mechanisms to sustain that over a period of 3 to 5 years. Number of NSC passes by qualifications, you can see there, they are in there. I need to move off this slide quickly before people who have their brains wired in figures working out the pass rate. The number of bachelor passes trend, as already indicated, the highest was in 2013, and we dropped to 28.3. We are yet to be informed as to what is going to happen this year. Of course, the highest number, again in terms of the real numbers, was in 2013, 171,755. Bachelor passes per province, I think you can see it there. 2014 and 2015. The good thing is that the numbers have gone up. Can you see that? From 2014 to 2015, except for probably 1 or 2 provinces, but generally the numbers have really gone up. And I need to move off quickly there as well. Bachelor achievements, 2014 and 2015, there you have the comparison. Of course, in 2014, we had 150,752, and the percentage is 28.3%. And we'll get the 2015 percentage later. Okay. In terms of the poverty ranking of schools, quite a nice movement there, a geometric increase from quintile 1. Quintile 1 is your poorest school, the second poorest, the third poorest school, and then quintile 4 and 5 are your so-called affluent schools. If you look at the numbers in terms of your poverty ranking of schools look very good. You can see 2014 and 2015, there's an increase in the 2015 numbers. I'm going to move off this one, Dr. Polia, and just indicate that in terms of the bachelor passes, again, in terms of the poverty ranking of schools, a nice improvement there from quintile 1 up to even quintile 5, moving from 34,000 to 51,000, all the way. You are allowed to applaud the system. Progressed learners, we waited with bated breath, concerned about the impact that progressed learners would have in the performance of the qualification. We had 65,000 who entered, 58,000 wrote, all the 7 subjects, and 22,060 passed the National Senior Certificate, and 7,015 wrote less than 7 subjects. So out of 58,000 progressed learners who wrote, who ordinarily might have been lost in the system, 22,000 of them passed. Right, this one is just an indication that if you take out progressed learners from the rest of the learners, that's what the percentage of 2015 would be 74.1%. Well, repeater candidates, we had 17,000 of those, 12,000 passed, and that gives you 72.9% of that group. I'm going to move to this one quickly. Schools performing within the different percentage categories, you can see that there has been some movement, but overall the trend seemed to favor 2014 as compared to 2015 there. I'll move over this one as well. And quickly rush to subjects. Well, the subjects again, overall, you can see there's a drop in the percentages, but if you look at real numbers, the actual numbers, the performance of 2015 compares favorably with the performance of 2014. I'm going to move to, I want to cover districts quickly. District performance. In terms of district performance, We have 81 districts, as already indicated. Out of the 81 districts, those who perform below 50%, you've got 8, 1 from the Eastern Cape, 7 from the Eastern Cape, and 1 from KZN. Those who performed below 59.9%, we've got 14, 8 from the Eastern Cape, 4 from KZN, and 2 from Limpopo. Well, Program Director, in terms of the underperforming districts, which are districts performing below 60%, all districts come from only 3 provinces, Eastern Cape, KZN, and Limpopo. I think I will just end it here. Let me see, part-time candidates. The part-time candidates have improved, particularly if you look at the subjects that they wrote. They performed better in 2015 compared to 2014. A very nice improvement there. But something very important, learners with special education needs. This is 2014 class. If you compare the 2014 class, you'll see there's an increase in 2015. Numbers wrote, number of bachelors, diplomas, higher certificate, the NSC, the endorsed NSC, and of course an increase in the number of learners who did not achieve. But overall, a very nice improvement for learners with special education needs as well. Chairperson, thank you very much for affording me the time. I think it brings me to the end of the technical report presentation. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thank you, DG, for that very comprehensive report on the performance of the class of 2015. And I think DG has done extremely well in contextualizing the performance of this particular class in terms of the broader issues that confront us as a system. And DG, my apologies, very seldom does one have an opportunity to direct and cut short your Director General, but I was prompted by the men behind the scenes that time was running out. Now, we have at least 5 minutes for questions, and I'm going to appeal to you to present questions which you think you will not be able to obtain from the literature and the documents that we will provide you. Let me just assure you that this entire presentation, with the question marks removed, will be available on our website from tomorrow morning. You will also be provided with a comprehensive report on the performance that covers most of the tables and the graphs, and that report will be in your hand before you leave this auditorium this evening. We're going to provide you with what we call the main NSC report. You'll also be provided with the schools report, which gives you an indication of the performance of each of the schools in the country, together with a pamphlet that provides you with a synopsis of the results of the class of 2015. So let's just take 2 or 3 questions, and I want to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Director General, in which branch examinations and assessment are located, Mr. Pediachi, and the Director General alerted me that he would be directing all the higher grade questions in the direction of his Deputy Director General. So, Mr. Pediachi, if there's a need, we're going to ask you to join us on stage in the next few seconds. So, can I just allow for 2 questions which are pertinent, burning, and of critical importance? DG, you've done extremely well. You must have been an excellent teacher. There are no questions, unless my eyesight is failing me. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being such an attentive audience. We're now going to prepare for the live broadcast, and I'm sure many of you have come in this afternoon particularly to meet with your 20 seconds of fame. And I'm sure you want the TV cameras to get a glimpse of you. So we'll give you some time to make sure that you're positioned appropriately, you're sitting in the right row. Just look out as to where the cameras are and make sure that you're in the line of the view of the camera. And for those of you ladies who want to pull out your lipstick and just brush up your hair, and men I also know do the same, you're given the opportunity to do that. But what we're now going to do, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hand you over to Mr. Elijah Mhlanga and Shanae Hark. They are our communications team, and they are now going to arrange the venue for the live broadcast. They would give you the rules and the procedure that needs to be followed. But once again, let's put our hands together for the Director General, who's done an excellent job in terms of the presentation this afternoon. And thank you for being such a good audience, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy thoroughly the next part of this afternoon's proceedings. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we request that you make way to allow us to arrange the venue for the next 15 minutes or so, because we need to kind of rearrange the chairs and place the right equipment at the right spots. Thank you. Yeah.